Oh hey, what's up everyone? Welcome back to Workshop Rebuild. In today's episode, I'll share with you guys the hidden costs within the John Deere 400 restoration, and I'll share with you guys how much time I invested to make the John Deere 400 look like this. So grab yourself something good to drink, sit back and relax. This is the second time I'm doing a video like this. I previously did one just like this for the John Deere 300. Many of you guys enjoyed that video. I gave you guys a better insight on how much it costs to do a restoration or a rebuild like this. And for you, it would also give you a better understanding on how much time it really does take to restore something to this condition. I will start off with the cost of the rebuild right away, but if you guys aren't interested in how much it costs, you guys can skip ahead down below in the timeline and figure out how long it took me to get to this part of the restoration. I made some notes on my phone that I don't miss anything. I have some subcategories, and off to the left of the screen you guys will see everything will be on screen, so you guys will also have a better understanding of what I'm discussing right here. The first category I will bring up is the hydraulic motor rebuild. There are various costs within the hydraulic motor. I had to replace all the seals, the O-rings, I had to get a new filter, I had to replace both bearings, the spring pins were replaced, and also I had to use some new gasket material to put everything back together. The total on all those products cost me exactly $73.48, and that is Canadian dollars. Once that was complete and I rebuilt the hydraulic motor, I then moved on to the rear end. The rear end is a peerless rear end. It is a 2-speed. It is specific for a John Deere 400. The John Deere 420 or even the 430 have a locking diff, so they even have a different rear end. Even though it is a peerless, they just have locking diffs on the same rear end. The rear end was in great condition. Even though I rebuilt it, I didn't have to do much. I did replace the seals and the O-rings within the rear end. That cost me $30. And I also had to fill it up with new automatic transmission fluid, which is type F fluid, and that cost me $45. That fluid is not cheap, so we have a total of $75. I did use a little bit of gasket material and a little bit of silicone here and there, but in all, it cost me $75. Now this might be a little bit controversial, but I will move on to the engine cost. Many of you do an engine swap if you guys do not like your Kohler. I personally like doing everything original because it goes back into the same position. I don't have to modify any brackets. I don't have to modify anything to the front PTO. Everything lines up super smooth, so there's not much modification involved, and thus you do not have to waste a lot of time on that. This engine rebuild didn't really cost that much compared to an off-the-shelf engine that you'd buy. Around 20 horsepower would be between $1,000 and $2,000. If you find something used, it's still pretty pricey. So I think with the total I invested within this engine rebuild, it was actually cost effective. The engine was bored out and honed to 10 thousandths oversized, and that cost by an engine rebuilder here in town 280 Canadian dollars. After that, I had to purchase an engine oil filter. That was purchased locally at an automotive store. And I also purchased 2 brand new pistons and a full gasket kit for the Kohler K532, and that came to a total of 282.66 cents Canadian dollars. If we take those numbers and we add them all together, we come to 570.66 cents. That is once again Canadian dollars. So this is under 1,000 Canadian dollars, and I do not think I would be able to find a 20 horsepower engine anywhere out there which is in the same condition or better if it were used or new for that price. So I'm really satisfied that I went with the rebuild on this. Everything fits super smooth and I did not have to modify anything, so that saved me a whole bunch of time. The next category is various parts, and I only have 3 things to mention. I had to replace the hydraulic lift cylinder on this garden tractor for the 3-point hitch. When I extended the rod, I saw it was damaged because it was rubbing up on some metal, which I had to bend back on the rear end of this garden tractor. So the metal was fixed, and I found a used hydraulic cylinder in great condition online. That cost me exactly 133 Canadian dollars. That was 100 US back then. On the front of the garden tractor, I took the PTO apart. We have a needle bearing and a radial bearing within the housing. So I replaced the radial bearing. The needle bearing was still in pristine condition, and the radial bearing cost me exactly $4.85. The O-rings for the valve block, so all the O-rings involved within the valve block, cost me exactly $4.37 Yes, that's not much, but it was crucial to rebuild that so we have proper pressure and no leakage within our hydraulic system. All those parts together cost exactly $142. So the last category I'll get into is the cosmetics of this John Deere 400. As you guys can see, it is finally green once again. The rims are yellow and the frame and all the frame assembly is painted black. So everything looks very good. Everything involved in the cosmetics were green paint, black paint, and yellow paint. That cost me exactly $75. I had to purchase a little bit of yellow paint, but some of the green and some of the black I already had from before, so that comes down to around $75. The decals on the hood cost me 72 Canadian dollars. I found them online on eBay, so that was pretty cost effective. I did inquire by Deere how much these decals would cost, and each decal was 60 Canadian dollars each. And actually they sell the left and the right side stripe separately, so that would come to $120, so $72 is quite cost effective. The seat, which you guys can see behind me here, is brand new. It is aftermarket. Many of you have complained that I didn't really put an original seat on, but I think an aftermarket seat is a great solution for the time being. If I do want to go the OEM route, I might purchase one in the near future. This seat right behind me here cost me $136.50. The taillights, which are also aftermarket, cost exactly $12.60 each. The total of cosmetics on this John Deere 400 garden tractor came to $296.10. When I add up all the costs within this rebuild, I come to a total of $1,157.46. That's Canadian dollars, and that's roughly $900 US. I personally think putting $1,000 into this garden tractor right here is totally worth it. This tractor has a front and rear PTO, it has a 3-point hitch, it can pull or even push something. So this tractor right here is a little workhorse, and $1,000 is totally worth it. I think $1,000 is totally worth it for this garden tractor right here, but let me know down below in the comments if you guys think $1,000 is worth it to invest in a garden tractor like this. Before this video started, I did mention I'll share with you guys how much time I invested within this garden tractor. So while I was rebuilding this, after every day I worked on it, I made a timesheet and wrote in exactly how long it took me so I can make a video like this for you guys. When I had a good look at the timesheet, I made separate categories. I came up with 4 categories. The first category is teardown and rebuild. The machine teardown was one of my first rebuild videos, so I tore this machine down within 8 hours. After that, I moved ahead and worked on the hydraulic motor. That took me exactly 3 hours. After the teardown, I had a lot of cleaning to do, but I really focused on the hydraulic motor. That was one of the first things I wanted to work on. So I tore that apart and I rebuilt it within 3 hours, and I think that's pretty efficient. Once the hydraulic motor was rebuilt, I pushed that aside and I grabbed a hold of the rear end. The rear end was a little bit bigger, and I was new to this rear end because I've never opened one before. So I went ahead, tore it down, and rebuilt it within 4 hours. I would say the teardown is much faster, so that would be 1.5 hours, and the rebuild is about 2.5 hours. The valve spool within this hydraulic system took me exactly 2 hours. I calculated 1 hour for the teardown and exactly 1 hour for the rebuild, so that was pretty efficient as well. I didn't really know how to open up one valve spool, so that took a little bit longer, but in total it was only 2 hours. The next category I'll get to is various parts. Once again, I didn't know how to categorize these, so I put them under the various parts category. Some of the damaged parts on this John Deere 400 were not very bad, but I still had to touch up something here or there, and that took me a total of exactly 3 hours. When we look at the cleaning side of things, which I mentioned before, there was a lot of cleaning after the teardown. The cleaning process took me about 5 hours. There was a lot of scrubbing, there was a lot of scraping, and there was a lot just to clean up in general. Every time you clean something and it falls on the concrete, you have to sweep it away, or else it just embeds within the concrete. So that took me a total of 5 hours. The base frame assembly, which is the assembly process of the teardown, took me exactly 8 hours. This was pretty efficient as well, as I put a whole bunch of things back on, and even my own video helped me to put some of the things back onto the base frame. The next category is the engine. I did focus on the engine a little bit. I also made a rebuild video and a teardown video of the Kohler K532. This engine specifically was torn apart within 3 hours and also cleaned up within 3 hours, so I'm really happy with that. After that, I had to measure up a whole bunch of parts to make sure that they are according to spec. That took me a little while, but I didn't actually write that down. I would say that took another hour or so. Once all the parts were measured, I ordered some new parts online, which were the pistons and a brand new gasket kit from iSave Tractors. The engine was sent out, I had it bored and honed to size. Once that came back, I rebuilt the engine within 8 hours. These 8 hours are with the video I shared with you guys, so that is the rebuild video. It would not usually take me 8 hours, even though when you rebuild an engine, you want to make sure everything is spot on. I would say this is probably half the time without a video I would share with you guys. The next category is the wiring. I don't have much to say about the wiring, but even though there are a couple wires within this garden tractor, it took me exactly 4 hours to dismantle everything, to clean up all the connections on each wire. And I have to admit, I didn't have to change one wire on this whole system. I was able to reuse every single wire, and I'm super happy with that. The next category is the cosmetics once again. We're not talking about the cost, but we're talking about the time invested to make the tractor look like this. And I will start with the prep work on all the black parts. Even though this John Deere is very green at the moment, there is a lot of black on this tractor, and you guys saw it from part 1 all the way to around part 10. And all the prep work for the black panels took me 38 hours. I touched every single part on this garden tractor, scuffed it up, or removed the paint completely, and it took me exactly 38 hours. That's a whole bunch of work, but I have to admit it's totally worth it for this restoration. The paint job, on the other hand, took me exactly 4 hours, so that is for the black paint. I was able to hang a lot of parts up and spray them at once, and I did have to bring parts in and out of the shop because it was very cold outside, and I don't necessarily want to paint inside the shop because the paint just goes everywhere. So I painted outside and I had to run in and out a little bit, but it only took me 4 hours. So now talking about the rims specifically, all 4 rims took me exactly 4 hours of prep work. After that, I gave them a paint job, and that took me about 2 hours. What I did with the rims is I painted one side, and then I flipped them later on after they were dry to the touch, flipped them around and gave the other side a coat of paint as well. And that took me exactly 2 hours. Now I'm going to discuss the panel work. So the hood is fiberglass, as you guys know, but all the other panels are metal. And most of the metal panels I sanded down to bare metal, and the hood I scuffed it up as good as I could, and I also had to fill in the hood quite a bit because there were a lot of little dings on the fiberglass hood. So the prep work for all the panels took me exactly 14 hours. After all the parts were sanded, I brought them back to the John Deere 400, and I had to adjust all the panels and make sure everything aligns just fine. I had to even bend some of these side panels to make them fit a little bit nicer towards the front. And I also had to make sure all the screws were held in place properly. The panel adjustment and making sure everything lines up took me exactly 4 hours. Once everything was lined up on the garden tractor, I took everything back off the garden tractor and I painted them for 3 hours. Now when we add up all the time which I listed on the left side, we come to a total of 117 hours of work on the John Deere 400 to get to this point. I personally think it's very long because I had a lot of prep work to do, and that takes away a lot of time, especially 38 hours for all the black parts. Obviously, if you'd send this off to sandblasting, or if you'd have some other method, you could get the paint work done in a much quicker time, especially the prep work. Obviously, the prep work is very important. That's the outcome of your paint job, basically. But I really think it's a little bit long for this garden tractor. I'd really like to know from you guys if 117 hours is worth it or not. I shared with you guys how much I spent on this rebuild, and I also shared with you guys how much work I put into this John Deere 400, so you guys have a better understanding at home if you guys would like to tackle a project like this yourself. I hope you guys are still enjoying your beverage at home. This video is unfortunately coming to an end right here. I shared with you guys a whole bunch of facts on the John Deere 400. I am looking forward to using this John Deere 400 in the near future, as I do have a rear-mounted rototiller, and I will be working on that very soon, so stay tuned for upcoming videos.